The clock of time turns slowly, opening the forgotten pages of history. Across centuries and kingdoms, many rulers have risen and fallen, but few names echo through time as powerfully as Alexander the Great. More than 2,000 years ago, in the northern lands of Greece, there stood a small but growing kingdom called Macedon. It was a rugged land of mountains, valleys, and strong warriors. In the year 356 BC, inside the royal palace of this kingdom, a child was born who would one day change the course of the ancient world. The child was named Alexander, the son of King Philip II of Macedon. From a very young age, Alexander showed signs of intelligence and courage that amazed those around him. While other children played simple games, Alexander was fascinated by stories of heroes, warriors, and distant lands beyond the mountains. As he grew older, Alexander was taught by one of the greatest philosophers of the ancient world, Aristotle. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander studied science, philosophy, medicine, politics, and the history of great civilizations. But perhaps more importantly, he learned to think like a leader. Alexander loved reading about the legendary Greek hero Achilles, a warrior known for bravery and glory in battle. Inspired by these stories, Alexander dreamed not only of ruling Macedon, but of conquering lands far beyond it. While studying and learning, Alexander also trained like a warrior. Macedonian soldiers were known for their strength and discipline, and Alexander trained with them daily. He learned to fight with sword and spear, to ride horses with great skill, and to lead soldiers with confidence. One famous story from his youth tells of a wild horse named Bucephalus. The horse was powerful but uncontrollable, and none of the king's soldiers could tame it. When the young Alexander approached the horse, he noticed that it was frightened by its own shadow. Calmly, Alexander turned the horse toward the sun so it could not see the shadow, and then he mounted it. To everyone's amazement, he successfully rode the horse. From that day on, Bucephalus became Alexander's loyal companion in many battles. Alexander's father, King Philip II, was a brilliant military leader who had spent years strengthening the Macedonian army. He created a powerful formation known as the phalanx, where soldiers stood close together with long spears, forming an almost unbreakable wall. As Alexander grew into a young man, he often accompanied his father on military campaigns and learned the strategies of war. But the future of Macedon would soon change in a sudden and tragic way. In the year 336 BC, King Philip II was assassinated during a public celebration. The kingdom was thrown into shock, and many enemies believed Macedon would collapse without its strong king. But Alexander was only 20 years old when he took the throne. Despite his young age, he acted quickly and decisively. He secured his power, defeated rebellions in Greece, and proved that he was more than capable of ruling the kingdom. Once the kingdom was stable, Alexander turned his attention to a much larger goal. To the east lay the vast Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in the world. For generations, the Persians had been rivals of the Greek world. Alexander decided that Macedon would not simply defend itself against Persia. Instead, he would invade the empire and conquer it. In 334 BC, Alexander gathered his army of about 40,000 soldiers and began his campaign into Asia. His troops crossed the sea and stepped onto the shores of Persian territory. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but Alexander led his army with confidence and bold strategy. One of the first major battles took place at the river Granicus, where Alexander's forces faced the Persian army. Despite the strong resistance, Alexander led a direct attack and secured victory. This victory was only the beginning. As Alexander marched deeper into the Persian Empire, more cities fell under his control. One of the most famous battles occurred at the Battle of Issus, where Alexander faced the Persian king himself, King Darius III. Although Darius commanded a much larger army, Alexander's tactics and leadership turned the tide of battle. The Macedonian forces pushed forward with discipline and coordination, and eventually the Persian army collapsed into retreat. King Darius fled the battlefield, leaving Alexander victorious. With each victory, Alexander's reputation grew across the ancient world. Cities opened their gates to him, and many people began to see him not just as a conqueror, but as a powerful ruler destined for greatness. Alexander continued south toward Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. The Egyptians honored him as a pharaoh and supported his rule. While in Egypt, Alexander founded a new city near the Nile River. He named the city Alexandria. Over time, it would grow into one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, becoming a center of trade, culture, and learning. But Alexander's ambition did not stop there. After securing Egypt, he turned his army east again to confront the remaining forces of the Persian Empire. The final and most decisive battle came at the Battle of Gaugamel in 331 BC. Once again, Alexander faced the army of King Darius III. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander carefully studied the battlefield and executed a bold attack. His cavalry charged at the right moment, breaking through the Persian defenses and sending the enemy army into chaos. King Darius fled once again, and the Persian Empire soon collapsed. With this victory, Alexander became the ruler of one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. His empire stretched from Greece and Egypt all the way across Persia and into Central Asia. But Alexander was not satisfied. His curiosity and ambition pushed him even farther east toward the lands of India. His army marched through deserts, mountains, and unfamiliar territories for years. Eventually, they reached the edges of India, where Alexander fought another difficult battle against King Porus. Even though the battle was hard, Alexander once again secured victory. However, by this time his soldiers had grown tired from years of marching and fighting. They had traveled thousands of miles from home and faced countless battles. At last, the army refused to march any farther east. Realizing that his men had reached their limit, Alexander agreed to turn back. The long journey back toward the west eventually brought the army to the great city of Babylon. There, Alexander began making plans for the future of his vast empire. But in the year 323 BC, at only 32 years old, Alexander suddenly fell ill. After days of sickness, the great conqueror died in Babylon. His death shocked the ancient world. Without a clear successor, his massive empire was soon divided among his generals. Yet even though his empire did not remain united, Alexander's legacy continued to shape history. His conquests spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across vast regions of the world. Cities founded by Alexander became centers of learning and trade. Greek and Eastern cultures blended together, creating a new era known as the Hellenistic Age. For centuries after his death, historians, soldiers, and leaders studied the life of Alexander the Great. His courage, ambition, and military genius made him one of the most legendary figures in history. More than 2,000 years later, the name Alexander the Great still echoes through time, reminding us of a young king who dared to dream of conquering the world.